U.S. Army is undergoing a $48 billion transformation to modernize its forces, redirecting funds towards technologies like drones, AI systems, and advanced weapons. And joining us now, U.S. Secretary of the Army, Dan Driscoll. Mr. Secretary, it's good to have you on set.
Thank you for having me here.
You are very welcome. And we were talking. I said, "Oh, you're a civilian, but you did serve in the Army."
Yep.
But you said you're still soft. I said, I wish we had served, so we were meant, so we could be called men at this point in our lives.
Calluses on your hands.
Just something. Okay, but he says he's soft too, so maybe we're all just soft. But we appreciate the men and women that do what we probably wouldn't be very good at. I would think. So we've been hearing about the change that all of our strategic defenses, or now it's called the Department of War, but what we need to do to fight next, the future type of war, and we're totally behind in what we're trying to do. Is this a big transformation you're trying to affect?
I think it's probably a 50 or 60 year transition and transformation. If you just look at how humans are inflicting violence on each other worldwide, especially in Israel and Ukraine, what you realize is nearly every nation has to adapt immediately. Drones have completely and utterly changed the game.
Find that out from the Russia-Ukraine.
Absolutely. And what Ukraine did in Russia, they had under $100,000 worth of drones take out almost $10 billion worth of Russian equipment. And if you as our nation process that fact that Russia's actually in that fight, which we're calling the Silicon Valley of warfare, and they have those lessons and it still happened to them, basically every nation, it was a wake-up call that the amount of innovation and investment and energy that needs to go into countering that drone threat and kind of completely reforming how nations buy and build and acquire. I think everyone around the world is.
And you could even make Democrats happy if it cost less and it was more effective. Could you not? You could cover all your bases with something like that.
The bipartisan support received on this under President Trump has for a long time been talking about the skies and how we need to provide safety there. If you think of Golden Dome, that's kind of a different iteration of it. But even Democrats are incredibly supportive of these.
Well, I want to talk to you about that because we talked about it yesterday, and I didn't understand the answers that I was getting at all.
We were talking to the director the writer of House of Dynamite.
House of Dynamite, where there's a rogue ICBM headed this way.
Yep.
And I said, well, do we need a Golden Dome? Will it work like the Iron Dome? She goes, no, we need to have, we need to get rid of all nuclear weapons. I'm like, well, if it's rogue, that's one. How many do we have still?
We don't answer that.
More than 1,000?
We have many.
How many does Russia have? Can we answer that?
Many.
More than 1,000.
Yeah.
It would be nice to go to zero, but it's not going to happen. And you also at the beginning of this said we're learning ways to kill each other more efficiently and more quickly than ever in the past. And I guess that's probably not going to stop, no matter how much we'd like it to.
I think that's probably exactly right. If you think of what President Trump is essentially saying is that there's this existential threat to every nation. And if you don't invest heavily in that, what is the purpose of your nation? And so under President Trump, we're spending $1 trillion on defense and reinvigorating the department.
Smartly, and we're spending more, and we're spending it more smartly.
Unequivocally. So the United States Army for 30, 40 years has had terrible outcomes because what we essentially did is we would guess what we would need. We would create these insane requirements documents, like the Colt 1911 pistol. So it was a pistol, was created almost 100 years ago with half a page of requirements, and it lasted the Army like 80 years. When we tried to replace our next pistol, it was a 300-plus page requirements document. So if you think of being a small and medium manufacturer in this country, you can't keep up with that. And so we only had 5 primes for the last 30 years, outputting really expensive, very exquisite, reasonably competent, but not sufficient equipment.
What caused that? How bad was ESG for the defense industry?
I think that amplified a lot of our already existing bad habits. The United States Army was not optimizing for things that benefited the United States.
What about manufacturers that don't want to go through the regulations that are necessary, or people picketing and wanting pension plans to divest from the shares of defense contractors? It just seems like that's all turned, though.
It has all turned. And Secretary Hegseth has been incredibly aggressive to say, for the Army in particular, If it's not good for soldiers, don't do it. Like, stop optimizing for all sorts of things that don't lead to lethality and don't lead to the things that actually matter, which is when we deploy our soldiers forward around the world on our behalf, are they able to complete the mission and return home safely?
I'm just curious, ultimately, if 10 years from now, how much do you think the defense budget has to grow or ultimately shrink for us to be, and also for us to be as effective as we are now, if not hopefully more effective?
So the kind of question of top line I would answer differently, which is the biggest thing that we have done wrong in the past, which we are not doing now, is we are partnering with American industry in new and different ways. So 4 weeks ago, we had CEOs of the top 15 companies in the country, 18 trillion in enterprise value, came in and we said, we have all of these problems when we think of moving data out of the Indo-Pacific. We have problems with how we build. Everything we build on our Army bases costs us 68.5% more inside our gate versus outside our gate. And so we said, what do you have as American industry to help us? And so we are actioning 3 of those topics they gave us. And then we brought in private equity. And we had a meeting 2 weeks ago with $5 trillion under management. And they are helping us rethink. We have millions of acres of assets all over this nation. How do we build the biggest data centers in the country and share that output with the American people? And so it's actually not top line that I think will get us back on track. It is partnership with America.
And by the way, talking about data centers, how much do you think that we're ultimately, as taxpayers, going to have to spend on data centers? I don't know if you saw, there's been some controversy. Sam Altman and OpenAI made some comments recently about the idea that the government should have a data center strategy unto itself. There's been some debate about whether he was trying to suggest that that the government, taxpayers, should be backing effectively data centers that OpenAI could use. He was saying that's not the case, but nonetheless, I think there's a bigger question about, how much we're going to ultimately have to spend on this.
So we're working with Treasury and the Treasury team to basically put together what we hope in the next 6 weeks would be like a MOU or an IOI on the largest data center in the country, to put it on an Army base. And essentially what we would contribute is the land and the security, and what we would get out of that is compute. So we don't want to be paid dollars. We as an Army know we need compute. And so I would imagine if you fast forward the tape 18 to 24 months, the United States Army is hosting some of the largest data centers in the nation. And just to reiterate, what we would have done in the past is spend months and years analyzing what it could look like to do it. What we are doing now is, right after this meeting, I'm headed back out to meet with some of the larger private equity firms. We are partnering with them and the hyperscalers to try to do this thing and get it live within 18 months.
Wow. Should we be concerned about what we have in our stockpile, given how much we've provided for our allies, whether it's Ukraine, Israel, whatever?
I think if you look at the American industrial base, which would be the private sector, or the organic industrial base, which is us, we and them make our munitions. And I think there's no right amount that you need.
And they're working on it now, I would think.
But we are scaling. We had decayed, basically the peace dividend. When you're at peace, as a nation, you want to spend your dollars on all sorts of other things other than defense.
Right.
I think the vast majority of leaders, particularly under President Trump's leadership, know that that is not sufficient for the world we live in. And so we are massively investing in building out the capacity to rearm ourselves.